In the past few weeks, the war in Ukraine has escalated again, with Russia attacking a range of targets across the country, including the capital, Kyiv. One deadly and terrifying part of this new wave of attacks has been the use of so-called kamikaze drones to blow up both energy infrastructure and civilian targets. But what do we actually know about these drones? Where are they coming from? And what does their use mean for war in Ukraine? Officially called the Shahed-136, or in Russian, the Geran-2, these drones were developed and manufactured by the Iranian government. Only entering service last year, the Shahed-136 is a triangular-shaped autonomous drone which dives toward its target and explodes on impact, destroying everything around its crash site. Each drone is about 11 feet long, weighs 440 pounds, and carries a roughly 88-pound warhead. Typically fired 5 or more at a time from a launch rack mounted on the back of a truck, they reportedly have a range of over 1,500 miles. This means they can be launched far from the front line of a conflict and are able to loiter around a particular location for hours at a time, attacking only when their target is located. Ukrainian officials have stated that the drones are being fired from 3 Russian bases in Crimea and another position in Belarus. But these drones are also relatively slow, noisy, and fly at a low altitude, making them easy targets for both traditional air defenses and even armed individuals. To get around this problem, they rely on numbers, with several Shahed drones usually striking at an area at the same time. This has proved difficult for Ukraine to counter, as even if one drone is destroyed, several more will likely still reach the target. Since the 10th of October, Shahed drones have played a major part in destroying nearly a third of Ukraine's power stations and killing dozens of civilians around the country. But why is Russia using these drones? There seems to be multiple reasons. First, their use might be a sign that Russia's military is running low on its traditional precision-guided ballistic and cruise missiles, which were used to damage the power grid, ammunition depots, and other strategic Ukrainian targets. Shahed drones have allowed Russia to continue this practice, even as its military continues to lose ground in the south and northeast of Ukraine. The drones are also important because Russia has so far failed to establish air superiority, putting its manned aircraft at a huge risk when flying into Ukrainian territory. Since Shahed drones are autonomous, Russia can still achieve its goals of destroying targets deep behind enemy lines without risking its dwindling supply of pilots. Finally, Shahed drones are relatively cheap weapons, costing between $20,000 and $50,000 each. This makes them ideal for Russia, whose economy has been seriously harmed by sanctions and the growing cost of its invasion. But does this low cost mean that these drones don't pack the same punch as conventional smart weapons? While the Shahed drone's 88-pound payload is quite small by military standards, their precision targeting makes them potentially devastating. In combat, they can explode near weapons, ammunition, or other combustible materials to greatly increase their damage. They also have created a new risk for Ukrainian forces, which had grown used to dealing with Russian missiles and artillery strikes. In contrast, the drone's targeting is much more unpredictable, and Ukraine only recently announced that it was able to shoot down a majority of them. The drone's extreme portability also makes them a dangerous and unpredictable threat. A truck full of Shaheds can engage in hit-and-run tactics by launching them and then leaving the area before a retaliatory strike can take place. Finally, even if the drones are destroyed over major cities, they can still cause major collateral damage when they fall to the ground. All of these features make the Shahed-136 a cheap but extremely powerful weapon, especially since the financial toll of destroying a drone vastly exceeds the costs of each one. But with all these sanctions placed on Russia, who's been brave enough to supply them with the weapons? The answer is Iran. But the reasoning behind this dubious collaboration might be worrying. Although the two countries have not always been friendly with one another, in the 21st century they are united by their hatred for the West. Bad news for those who thought that Russia will run out of weapons. Their current cooperation goes back to 2015, when Russia used its air force to intervene in the Syrian civil war. Iran was also involved in the conflict, supplying weapons and training to paramilitary groups. Together, the two countries worked to prop up their mutual ally, Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. Russian warplanes and Iranian-backed ground troops successfully kept Assad in power, while also acting as a slap in the face to Western countries. The war in Ukraine has provided another opportunity to work together, as Iran can prove to the world that it too can produce powerful military equipment. It also gives Iran a chance to field test these new weapons and give a display of just how much its military capabilities have improved in the past few years. Iran has also dispatched advisors to the Russian-occupied areas of Ukraine, who are reportedly providing the Russian drone operators with technical instruction. While Iran's government has officially denied selling the Shahed drones to Russia, analysts say there is clear evidence that they have. U.S. and Ukrainian intelligence services have claimed that Russia ordered around 600 of the drones at the beginning of the summer, about 250 of which have been so far deployed. Their presence in Russia is also backed up by other statements from the Iranian military. A major general in Iran recently said that major world powers are using Iranian-made arms, while its cyber warfare chief posted on Twitter that the Shahed drone was now the most talked about weapon in the world. This trend reverses the usual pattern of large countries selling weapons to smaller ones and means that Russia now has a reliable source of new weapons to continue the conflict. But by using Iranian-made drones, Russia now risks drawing in more international actors who support Ukraine. The most important of these might be Iran's political nemesis, Israel, which has so far remained neutral in the Ukraine war due to its complex relations with Russia. But on October 16th, Israeli cabinet minister Nachman Sa'i tweeted that Shahed drones removed any doubt where Israel should stand, urging military and economic support for Ukraine. Iran's growing alliance with Russia also makes a new nuclear deal between Iran and the West unlikely, an outcome favorable to Israel, which opposed the original agreement in 2015. But what does all this mean for Ukraine? Even though Ukrainian troops have continued to retake territory to the east, because of this new steady supply of modern military equipment, the conflict is unlikely to end anytime soon. With the Shahed drones and other Iranian weapons, Russia can continue its mass destruction of power stations, ammunition depots, and even civilian targets like apartment buildings. Western sanctions have little to no impact on the flow of weapons from Iran to Russia, making the alliance strategically valuable to both countries. But things are about to get even messier. A recent report by the Washington Post found that Iran will also begin selling their short-range ballistic missiles to Russia, which are deadlier than the Shahed drones. These developments pose a serious threat to Ukraine, which has also stepped up its calls for more Western support in the form of weapons and humanitarian aid. As the conflict becomes ever more international, there's a constant risk of escalation, especially as countries with previous rivalries like Iran and Israel get involved. Russia receiving a steady supply of these drones also means that nowhere in Ukraine is safe anymore. While ground fighting is still contained in the east of the country, Russia can use its new stockpile of Iranian weapons to attack cities and villages in the west of Ukraine. So even though the war has turned into an embarrassing failure, Russia may continue to rain death and destruction from above. There's no doubt that the use of the Shahed 136 drones marks a new and potentially terrifying phase of the war in Ukraine. Their precision targeting, unpredictability, long range, and cheap cost make them an ideal weapon for Russia's faltering military. Not to mention that the growing alliance between Russia and Iran might also mark a new stage of the war, one where even more international forces are pulled into the fray. Now watch What If Russia Launched a Nuclear Bomb Minute by Minute, or check out This Is How You Actually Survive a Nuclear Attack.